Remember, you said that there were no stupid questions.
Yes, no stupid questions.
So how do we go from your experiments? I'm going to get off of this counseling stuff quick before I get in any deeper. How do we go from your experiments, especially the one that has the two hemispheres on it, I think you said that was the second stage. How do you go from that to we must be in our virtual reality?
Oh, well, okay. You have a radioactive particle,
right.
I mean a radioactive substance that spits out particles. It has to spit out particles in any direction. I mean, it does. That's just, we've looked at radioactive particles for, probably
it's a point source.
100 years now, and they just come out randomly in any direction. Well, if it comes out randomly in any direction, it would be impossible to know how the next one was going to come out. Right? To say, well, the next one's going to come out on this side or that side would be impossible because it's just random. And since there's only two of them, you maybe could get it 50% by always saying it's going to come out on this side, and half the time it would, so you could maybe get 50%. But you wouldn't be able to tell for sure. Next one to come out is going to come out over here. Well, this experiment allows the experimenter to do that. They're going to say, next time a particle comes out, it's coming out here, and the next one is going to come out here, and the next one's going to come out there. So rather than getting a 50-50, you get 100%. Telling where the particles come out. Well, how can that happen to a material, nuclear material that is sending out particles? If it's just a machine that sends out particles, then, all right, that's a material way. But this seems to be something that throws out particles in particular directions at particular times for a reason. Or not a reason, there's some intelligence behind it. There's something it's picking. Because the only way that you can know about it ahead of time is you know how it's picking. It's know how it's making the choices. There's some sort of logic behind it. It's not just random. It's doing it for a reason with logic. And that requires an intelligent function behind it. Some sort of logic behind it. So it can't just be the machine. There's more than the machine there. There's a machine and some intelligence. And then, of course, you can not do the experiment that way. You can just look at those two hemispheres and see what you get. And what you'll get is randomness in both hemispheres, just like you would expect. But then you set this experiment up, and now you're able to pick which one goes. So something about setting the experiment up makes the nuclear source act differently. That's impossible. The only way that could be done is if it's not just a machine. There's something else going on behind the scenes.
So you've got some method of setting up the experiment by which you'll be able to predict the location of the next hit.
Yes. That's the way it is. And the other one is with a, not the two hemispheres, but with a thing called a beam splitter. It's a piece of plastic, and light hits it, and either goes through or it reflects. It's usually at a 45-degree angle, so it hits and goes up here, or it goes through. And it's a 50-50. Has to do with the dielectric constant and a few other things that gives it a probability of doing that. And we've measured these for, again, 100 years. They've been around, and we know that they are. We can manufacture them to be 50% or 30% or 90%. You can manufacture them to be however they are, but once it's made that way, that's what it does. And with this experiment, I'll be able to predict, is it going to reflect or is it going to transmit? What's it going to do before it ever gets there? Which again, just says there's something else going on behind the curtain. It's not just a random machine. And it should be. And this is a physical substance. So when you get a physical substance that isn't acting like a material object, it tells you it's not a material object. It's a virtual object.
So first, I wanted to clarify that the movie that I was referencing yesterday, it's not called Fighting for Your Life, it's called Defending Your Life with Meryl Streep and Al Brooks, and I highly recommend it because I think it'll resonate with a lot of us, and it's also funny. But there's a scene in there where they're in the Past Lives Museum, and they're seeing their past lives, and it kind of got me thinking, kind of on a lighter, entertaining note, if you have any interesting stories about visiting your past lives, and also if there's a benefit to doing that for people.
Well, I may have an interesting story or two, but I'm really not going to tell it. But I'm honest anyway. I'm really not going to tell it. But for the most part, it's not really helpful. It's not a really big help. Now, it can be helpful for some people under certain situations, but that's more rare. Usually, it's curiosity, or I just want to know. It's one of those things which is basically ego. I just want to know because I'd like to know. Surely I must have been a king or a queen or somebody important, surely, and it's ego would like to know. And that's because ego likes to compare and contrast. Oh, I'd like to see what I was and see how much better I'm doing now. All that judging, that's ego. So for the most part, there's not really any useful information there. All your growth is here with the choices you have here. Okay, that's the thing. Now there's some exceptions. The exceptions to that would be the sort of things that Brian Weiss does. Dr. Brian Weiss is a psychiatrist. He actually was, pretty high up in the structure as far as psychiatrists goes, a well-known psychiatrist. And he stumbled across something called past life regression. And he found that it worked very well for his patients. And he would take them with hypnosis. He'd hypnotize, take them back, regress them to a past life. Now you're younger and younger. Now you're just a baby. Now it's before you were a baby. Now it's before that. And, they do the past life thing, and they would talk about it. And he found it was very successful therapy. He could help people that otherwise he wasn't able to help with this therapy. Well, the therapy works in a couple of ways. One is that, well, let me do the most obvious one first, and that is that there actually was something in a past life that actually still affecting you now. But that is a rare circumstance. That really doesn't happen that often. But it's possible, okay? Last life I was covered by evil spiders, and they sucked all my blood dry before I could get help, something like that. So now I'm afraid of spiders. Okay, so now you have a phobia with spiders. So you go back to a past life and you say, oh yeah, well that's why. You had this past life and all the spiders got you. So that's still, the terror of that was so strong that you carried it along with you, and you still have a sense of that, and that's why you're afraid of spiders now. All right, that's a possibility. But there's a larger possibility that is even more likely, and it's just as good therapy, and that is that there weren't any spiders in your past life. But you're afraid of spiders. That makes you feel bad about yourself. That makes you feel like, every time I'm around, a little spider shows up, I scream and run, and then I look silly, and I feel embarrassed. And it's a nuisance to have this fear of something that's around in around in all environments. There's always little spiders around. And I act really stupid when the spider's only this big, and I scream and run away. So it's a phobia, right? So you don't feel so good about yourself. And it is embarrassing. But you can't help it. It's just the way you feel. So the psychiatrist will say, well, we just need to desensitize you. I'll show you pictures of little spiders in books, and then I'll let you touch the picture, and then we'll keep working up to where you actually see real spiders, and you learn to control it. Basically, that means not get over it. That means control it. So it's still there, but you learn how to keep it from getting to you, which is getting rid of the symptom not necessarily getting rid of the problem. So sometimes you can get rid of the problem till you control it so well that you don't even know you have it anymore. Well, then you've really gotten rid of it, I guess. Unless you then suddenly become terrified of snakes or something else that takes the place of that because you didn't really get rid of it. It just transfers to some other part of you. But anyhow, it's so nice if the psychiatrist can regress you. You can decide that you were mobbed by spiders in a past life, and that's what your problem is. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not insane. You're not silly. You're not broken. It was your past life. You had all those spiders, of course. All right, now you're a lot better, you see, and now you can get better. You can say, well, okay, that's silly. You know, I did this thing. I understand why it is, and now I can deal with it. So you start dealing with it, and you get better, and you get over it. Whereas if you just have this problem and you're defective, it's really hard to deal with it, and you don't know where it comes from. It's just this big mystery. But if you can point at it, and it's not you, it's something else, it's a whole lot easier to deal with. So the therapy was very successful because sometimes they actually would find things in people's past lives that did carry over, traumas and things. And even if it never happened in a past life, it really was still good therapy. It gave people a way to deal with it that otherwise they weren't able to do. So it's a good, it's a good therapy either way. I suspect there were more of the gave people a way to deal with it than there was actually the problem in the past life. But that can be because all sorts of things. You can go to a past life and say, oh, okay, I was really sweet and wonderful and nice to everybody, and I got traumatized and beaten up and trashed and that sort of stuff. That's why I'm so protective now. Well, that gives you something to hang that problem on. And once you hang that problem on that hook, it's not yours anymore, and it's easier for you to get over it, you see. So it's good therapy either way. So the past lives can be useful, whether they actually happened or not. They're still useful for that sort of thing. But other than that, there's not a lot of value in knowing. There was these billboards that once were all over the place. It said, an inquiring mind wants to know. And it was about education, and particularly children, giving them a chance to grow and whatever, disadvantaged children. Inquiring minds want to know. And I just changed it to say, inquiring egos want to know. And that's what mostly past lives is all about. It's inquiring egos want to know. But it can be useful or amusing. But mostly, the thing that is the fly in the ointment to all of these things is that you never have certainty. In this world, you have very little certainty. Somebody says, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, but when you're dealing in the intuitive world, not the world of facts and stuff, but the intuitive world, there's always uncertainty with whatever it is you get. Lots of uncertainty. Because we are conscious. We're consciousness. One thing that conscious can do is it makes up information. It creates information. That's what consciousness does. It creates information, it sends information, it receives information. It's an information processor. Well, we can create all sorts of information. And if what we really want to do is boost ourselves up a little bit and we have that past life, maybe we'll just make ourselves, Queen of Sheba or King Louis or something, and we'll do that. We'll build up something that's kind of grand and desirable, or we'll find a good reason why we're afraid of spiders, or we'll do something that suits us because we get to make up information. And we tend to make it up according to our beliefs and according to our needs. So how do you know that it wasn't created in your own consciousness? You can never know, for sure. You get three sources of information that come to you. One is your own consciousness, one is other consciousnesses, and the other is the system. That's it. And none of them come with tags. You never know which is which. And you can never for sure separate them because it's all just information. You interpret the information. That information defines your reality. So you're never really sure what you get when you're dealing in the intuitive world. Now, that doesn't mean the intuitive world is full of confusion. If you work in the intuitive world, you will get accustomed to things that you get that are outside of you that you can test, like remote viewing, and you can get very good at it. So you're not just making it up, you're really good at it. 90% of the time you got the target right. You can get good at those things, and after a while you learn to trust that. And you build up trust with it, and you can use that as a tool. And the intuitive things can be very helpful. But you still never know for sure that what you get is what was there. You never know 100%. So I'd say that with years of practice, maybe a decade of practice, you're pretty sure. You're maybe 90% sure that what you get and where it comes from, that it comes from the database or it comes from another consciousness or whatever, and you're kind of aware of those things. And you know what it feels like when it comes from that source. So you can get fairly good at it, but you never know for sure. And as long as you have fear, that means as long as you have ego and beliefs and needs, then you have to be very skeptical of yourself. So above all the things else that you need to be skeptical of, yourself is number one. Now, if you don't have any fear, you're completely fearless, then your needs and your ego and your beliefs aren't going to be, creating information for you. Now your slate's much cleaner, and the stuff you get is almost always from outside of you, not from inside of you. But as much as you're walking around with fear and beliefs and ego, there's a chance that that stuff is self-created. What you get from the larger conscious system is almost always designed to help you grow up. Doesn't mean it's the truth. It just means it's designed to help you grow up. The system can tell you things. The system could tell you that you were devoured by 100 spiders just because it would help you get rid of that and take the next step. Might not necessarily be you doing that. The system could tell you that just because it knows that that would help you grow, help you go forward. It still doesn't mean it's true, and it's outside of you. You see? So you never really know for sure what where it came from or why you got it. So you always have to remain skeptical. Always skeptical. So the past lives, maybe if you're interested you could play with it, but there's not really a lot of value in it. It's nothing much about what you did in the past that's going to really affect your choices here. And if it doesn't affect your choices here, then it's really not very important.
Along these lines, I wanted to ask you about something that you had mentioned this weekend, and I'd also heard you bring up on multiple occasions before, which is to the effect that sometimes people operate according to the principle that I can't lose if I don't play. And I encountered that in a particularly intense and personal fashion through a family member whom I had not seen for a while, and then I reconnected with them. And I wasn't clear what I was experiencing at the time, but I came to realize that they had become a master at that. And in particular, they had masterfully enrolled a lot of different people, including what I would call authority figures, into their proposition that they couldn't participate because the world is too awful and their prior experiences had been too awful. And I think objectively they had faced some serious challenges. But rather than putting the emphasis on how I can overcome my challenges, they were devoting almost all their energy to building agreement around the conception is I can't possibly be expected to function because life is too hard. And what impressed me was how successful they were in building a social consensus around that. And I realized that that kind of behavior is not simply a function of an individual, but also their social environment. Sure. They're able to enroll people or bring them in and create almost another reality that I can't function and don't expect me to. So I just know that you've brought that up several times. Yeah. And it was a pretty intense experience for me. And
yes.
Just curious if you have any comments.
Well, yes, that happens. What we can do individually, we also can do in mass. You know, it's called collective consciousness. And anytime you have a group, and a group is defined as something that has members, really. So all you have to do to be a member of a group is define yourself, you know, with a group like that, is to define, is to agree with their premise. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I agree. And that's an easy step to take because it takes you off the hook. Once you say, there's nothing I can do about it, well, you're absolved now. You know, you don't have any guilt, or there's nothing that you're not doing or that you could be doing. You've basically absolved yourself from all culpability in what's going on. So that's the main reason for playing that kind of a game, is to basically take yourself out for having any responsibility for it, you see. Otherwise, well, there's this terrible thing going, what should we do about it? Well, we have responsibility to do something about it. What should we do about it? Well, now you're on the hook. And if you don't really care that much, but you feel guilty that you should, but you don't really want to because it's hard, or because it costs money, or because you may have to go out on the picket line or something else, and you don't want to do that, then you come up with a belief that tells you that, well, there's really nothing you can do about it anyway. It's very convenient, a very convenient way to go. So this collective consciousness is, I use a math term, but it's a vector sum of all the consciousnesses that are members, that are involved in it. And that collective consciousness is a thing that once you join a group, and any group you join, it could be your family. There's a collective consciousness in a family. Okay, if that family is real close-knit and real together, then there's a little, you know, group there. If that family isn't close-knit at all and they're all totally independent, then there isn't any collective consciousness there. It's not a thing, it's not a group. It could be your job. You know, you work for a certain corporation, and everybody that works for that corporation is a member of that corporation. And if you see yourself as a member of that corporation, then you begin to take on characteristics of that group identity. You start to act like that. You start to have ideas like that. Your politics shifts to that direction. You know, everything tends to, the collective consciousness starts to kind of pull you toward it. And you, when you become a part of it, you actually move the collective consciousness a little bit in your direction, because now you're adding something new. But you're just one consciousness versus, say, 1,000 consciousnesses that are also involved. So you don't move the it much. It can move you a lot if it's a large group. So it could be anything, any bunch of people that identify as belonging to a group that centers around an idea, a concept, proposition, anything. Doesn't really matter, has its own collective consciousness. And that's what Carl Jung was talking about when he talked about archetypes. We have archetypes. So at the human level, there's a human level, and there's a human archetype. Well, there's a human collective consciousness. It's all the collective consciousness of all the humans. And that changes. That collective consciousness, that archetype, isn't fixed in stone. It's of the consciousness that are involved in it now. Well, at a human level, there's not been a whole lot of change for a long time. Hopefully we're getting more change sooner, but it's been pretty much the same way. So that's, you know, that's true. And people who really want to sidestep responsibility would like to have other people agree with them. Because they may tell people, well, you know, I'm blameless. You know, I don't have anything to do with that. I don't have any responsibility, but that still leaves them feeling vulnerable. They can get a bunch of other people to agree with them. Well, now all together, their collective consciousness says, we're blameless. Don't look at us, you know. Nothing we can do about it, when that's generally not true. What they could do about it is fix themselves. They could get rid of their fear, they could get rid of their ego, and they could start being helpful and useful to other people. They could educate, say, you know, we've got this issue over here. Just thought you might like to know. You know, they could be doing things about it. No, they maybe can't fix it, but they could fix what they can about it. So that's a cop-out. But collective consciousness is a real thing that, you know, national is a collective consciousness in a national sense. We call that nationalism, right? That's it. Collective consciousness focused on nation. Collective consciousness within a basketball team, you know, whatever. Any group you belong to, there's a collective consciousness that's male and female. Any group that you identify with, you create this collective consciousness that affects you. And we have goofy things get into the collective consciousness called fads, like Beanie Babies. And, you know, and you get, you know, 40 people lined up at 5 o'clock in the morning at a store waiting for the store to open so they can buy a Beanie Baby, which is 15 cents a cloth sewn up with, you know, little styrofoam pellets inside or something. So that's collective consciousness makes that into a fad. Everybody's doing it, and you get that message that you need to do it too because everybody else is doing it, and you get caught up in that, and then your friends are doing it, and you know, you don't want to be not doing what your friends are doing, and it just, pretty soon, somebody sells, you know, 10 million Beanie Babies and runs off to the bank, retires, just because they were able to get a collective consciousness wound up about Beanie Babies. So you have to be careful who your friends are, because you also get a little collective consciousness going among a group of friends. You get 6 or 7 people together and they're all good friends. That'll create a little subgroup, and you start doing things that you wouldn't do on your own. Maybe bolder or maybe less bold, depends on the group. You start acting in ways that you wouldn't do otherwise. You know, if that's all negative, we call it a mob. It's about anger. You get a bunch of angry people together, and their anger feeds each other to the point that they'll do things as a mob that none of them would do individually. So that's collective consciousness. But people trying to escape from responsibility is a very common theme. A very common theme. Yeah.
I learned the hard way, one has to be very careful about confronting somebody like that, because they can feel very self-righteous and justified in what they're doing. And if one attempts to address the problem head on, one can anticipate strong pushback.
Yes, absolutely. Because otherwise they'd have to admit responsibility and that they haven't been doing anything, that they've been irresponsible. And nobody wants to admit that about themselves. So that's why the pushback is so strong, because it's personal. You wonder, well, you guys are all wound up over this intellectual concept, but it's not the intellectual concept, it's the personal aspect of it which makes it so strong. Yeah. Yeah, either I'm right or I'm guilty. Let's see, which one is it? You know, it's easy to choose. No, I'm right, of course. Other questions?
How does meditation work to help somebody lead a life that's more full of love, and is it an essential part of it?
Well, yes and no. Formal meditation, no, is not an essential part of it. You can get to the same things other ways. I talk about meditation in a very generic sense. Lots of things can be meditation. You know, sitting down and focusing on your breath or on a mantra or some other sort of thing. That's one way to do it. But you don't need those things. You can just sit down. You don't need the mantra. You don't need the breath. You can just sit down and be quiet and be with yourself and let the thoughts go. You can just do it on your own. Or you can do that sometimes listening to a favorite piece of calming music, or just looking at the flame dancing in the fireplace, you know. There's lots of things you can do that basically are meditations, but they don't fall under the formal heading of meditation, and any of them will do just as well. What meditation does is it gets you to become acquainted with your own consciousness. That's the main advantage. Gets you acquainted with your own consciousness, and it helps you develop the skill of getting your intellect to sit down and be quiet, which is absolutely necessary if you're going to do anything in the intuitive world. If you're going to develop an intuition, you need your intellect to be quiet, because it butts right in and starts assessing and judging and whatever, and that intuitive stuff just gets blown away by that aggressive intellect. So that's what it's good to train your intellect to be quiet, because that's what you do. In meditation, all you're doing is getting rid of thoughts. You just want to sit and be still and have no thoughts, an empty mind. That's basically meditation. And when your mind is emptied out and you're just sitting there and you're still, you're not really processing the environment, you're not processing anything else, you're not thinking about, you know, what you're going to do tomorrow, you're just still, quiet and empty. At that point, you are in the position of I am. That's it. There's nothing else going on. You're nothing else. You're not in a role, you're not in anything. You just are. You exist. You exist as consciousness. I'm conscious and I'm aware. That's it. That's getting to know your own consciousness. And then, if you like, you can use your intent to ask some questions, because now, when you don't have any thoughts going on, your intellect is quiet. So if your intent can come up and say something like, I'd like to have deeper insight into my motivations, or I'd like to understand a good path toward getting rid of fears, or I want to see a past life, or anything you want to do at that point, you will tend to do that. That information will come. It'll be there. You'll get that. And if your thoughts go inward to, am I okay? Am I really doing it right? Or am I a mess? Well, you'll get that information too. If you're a mess, you'll suddenly see this mess that you are. And that frightens people sometimes. And then they'll run away and they'll stop meditation. They're not going to do any more meditation, because what comes out is ugly. It's frightening. So it depends on the thoughts you have at that place where your intellect is quiet. Now you're thinking at the intuitive level, not at the intellectual level. You're still thinking, your mind's working, but it's not intellectual. You're not judging, you're not analyzing, you're just questioning, having a thought. So that's the value of it, is that's the place to start. Everybody starts getting acquainted with their own consciousness, seeing what's inside, and how you feel about it. Now the advantage to it otherwise is that it is extremely relaxing. While you're in that meditation state, you're completely relaxed. You'll notice a few other things. Often your body will start getting warm. That's because your blood pressure goes down, but your circulation goes up. All your capillaries dilate, so you have more blood flow. More blood flow is really healthy for your skin, but you kind of feel a warm glow going on. You will relax, most all of your stress and tension will go away, and after a half hour of being in that state, you come back kind of refreshed with energy. So it can be positive that way. For people who lead stressful lives and have a lot of stressful things going on in their head, that's a real good way to get a break, to get away from it. It's a good stress reliever. And eventually, as you develop your intuitive side, it becomes the launch pad for everything else you want to do. You want to get information out of databases, you want to you know, telepathically communicate with somebody, all these other things that you can do. That's the launch pad. First, you got to get in that place where you're disconnected from the world. Your thoughts are under control, your intellect is quiet, and you have intentions. The trick is staying in that space. You have an intention to, say, talk to somebody, and as soon as you hear a voice or get a message, your intellect wants to jump in and analyze it. Oh, was that real? Did I just make that up? You know, and you get that intellect coming in there doing that, and it's gone. You lost it then. So to just sit there and maintain that, no matter what else is going on, no matter what comes, whatever the messages are, just let it flow. And don't judge, is that real or not? Judge, is that useful or not? So meditation is usually the starting point. But you can meditate by yourself in your own way, make up your own mantra if you want one, or just sit and let stuff go. You know, lots of people meditate who never had instruction how to meditate. It's kind of a natural thing that people do when they kind of open themselves up and relax. It's not something you really have to learn as much as you have to just let happen. But it takes practice. Typically meditators that are doing something like mantras or breath, they get about, you know, I don't know, they get maybe a minute into it and then thoughts come in. Then they get rid of those thoughts and 10 seconds later more thoughts come in. They get rid of those thoughts and more thoughts come in, and they get frustrated that they can't make their mind be quiet. That's the typical experience of most first-time meditators. It's just constantly there's stuff running in there. It just takes practice. It just takes practice and a little patience, and eventually it goes away. One other thing about meditation is that it's a tool for accessing that calm state. Eventually you outgrow the tool. You don't need it. You can get to that calm state in a millisecond. You can just shift from wherever you're in into that state. You don't really have to go through the breath and say the mantra and, you know, do all that. You can just be there. So with practice, it becomes instantaneous, and you really don't have to meditate anymore. And if you've been meditating for a long time, it's typical that meditation will just stop. You'll stop meditating for a while, and then you'll start up again, and then you'll stop. When you stop, it's because you've gotten a lot of ideas and understanding, and now you have to apply it to your world. You have to be it. You have to integrate it at the being level. And that takes time and interaction. That's how you do that. Otherwise, if you integrate everything up here in your head, that's not really living it. So then you've got to go live it. And then when it all gets integrated, you get hungry for more, and then you start feeling the urge to go meditate some more. So it comes and it goes. So this idea is you're not just doing it right. If you don't meditate twice a day, you know, for 20 minutes each time every day, you're not on the right path. That's not true. You don't have to do that. You don't have to meditate at all. Just be still. Keep the thoughts out of your mind. Relax. Get to know yourself inside. First, it's your adventure to inner space. Okay. Someone else?
So could you describe how intellect is related to consciousness? Is it a function of consciousness? Is it a function of the avatar? It almost seems like it's its own thing, but how's it related? Like, what's the hierarchy of?
Okay. It's a function of consciousness. The avatar is just eye candy. It's so that you can look and see what the effects of things are. I make choice, and you know, there's effects to those choices. And the avatar limits what the conscious can do. So the physical world is basically sets of constraints on what the conscious can do within that virtual reality. So that's what the avatar is good for. But the intellect is the consciousness judging, analyzing, comparing. Okay? Those are the three functions of the intellect. Judges, analyzes, compares, contrasts, you know, that sort of thing. And you know, we talk about the being level as opposed to the intellectual level. And the being level is where the intellect is not functioning. It's not comparing or you know, assessing, judging. It's just quiet. And you can function, you can think at a level that is intuitive. And when you do that, you're so much more productive at almost everything and do almost everything better. The intellect is necessary for you to learn it, for you to learn a skill or what you're doing or how you're doing it. But if you always use your intellect to do it, you'll never be very good at it. You have to get to a point where what we call you're in the zone, right? And no matter what you're doing, when you get in the zone, that means you're no longer judging, analyzing, and comparing. You're just performing. And you can perform so much better in the zone than you can if your intellect is doing it. Because the intellect is always second guessing. The intellect says, no, a little more to the right, no, a little more to the left, a little higher, a little lower, do this, do that. It's always analyzing, judging, correcting, that sort of thing. And whatever you do, if you're constantly doing that, that's a huge distraction from actually getting work done. You have to get to the point where you get in the zone and it just flows. The most obvious example is touch typing. If you have to use your intellect to say, okay, that's an E. E, okay, it's this middle finger up here. There's the E. Okay, now the next, you know, if you do that, if the intellect's involved in figuring it out, you're a terrible typist. You'll never type more than maybe 10 words a minute, if you're lucky. But you get to the point where you no longer, you let your intellect sit down and be quiet. It just sees the words and the fingers move. It sees the words and the fingers move. You don't tell the fingers where to go. You don't think about what letters on what key. All of that has been subsumed now at the being level. It's all just part of you, and it functions. So, and it's good at anything. If you're an athlete, you can only perform well if you perform at the being level. If you have to think about what you're doing, you won't do very well. If you're an artist and you paint and it's all at the intellect, it won't be very good. You need to do it all from the being level. So no matter what you do, you know, even if you're dumping garbage cans in the back of a truck, if you do that from the intellectual level, you won't do it very well. You'll spill garbage on the streets, you know, you'll hurt your back, you know, it won't work. But you get into the zone where it just works and everything works and it's smooth, then it works well. You don't get hurt. So that's the being level versus the intellectual level. But those things are both properties of consciousness. They go with the consciousness. And they're both very important functions. We need our intellectual function. You know, you'll never be a good typist if you don't sit down at first and say, where's that A key? Oh yeah, there it is. You know, you need your intellect to point the direction, to get you interested in learning how to do it. It's analysis. My analysis says I'm going to have to learn to put input data into a computer. My life is just going to demand that. My intellect says it's a smart thing to do to learn how to type. So the intellect gives direction. It comes up with reasons why. It gets you to sit there. And it gets you to struggle with the keyboard and the words to get the right keys in the right order. And you struggle and struggle until you get to that magic point where it's easy. No thought anymore. But then once you get to the being level, now you're proficient. Now you're good at it. So the intellect doesn't really get good at much, but it directs everything. That's part of the problem when you live out of your head. If you live out of your intellect all the time, you know, you're really good at directing things, directing yourself, but you're not really very good at things other than logical process. Everything you do that's not logical process, you're clumsy at it. So that's why you need both, because that intellect will do better at math, solving math problems, but it's not nearly as good as in a relationship. But that intellect will help you pick that good relationship in the beginning, but then it has to develop at the intuitive level. So you really need both. to work. But those are all intellect, all consciousness functions. Yeah, the avatar has no conscience, doesn't have anything, doesn't have a heart, doesn't have a brain, really doesn't have anything unless you look. And then the system will render a heart or a brain if you cut open somebody, but if you don't cut them open, there's no point in rendering any of that. It's just eye candy, so that you can look at the picture and get a sense of what's going on. Yes?
So when you're in meditation or you're dreaming and you receive information via symbols, as opposed to, you were talking yesterday about how, in the beginning you receive stuff and you feel the answers. You were talking about how people who are very good, they perceive it as a feeling, and they can describe from a feeling point of view. So if you're continuously getting symbolism, it's because I'm still thinking out of my left brain, right?
No,
And
not necessarily. Doesn't have anything to do with thinking out of your left brain. You get symbolism when almost all of your communications, all your telepathic communications, tend to come in terms of metaphors. Metaphors are just symbols. It's a thing that's a symbol for something else. That's what metaphors are. You get a lot of metaphors in dreams. Most of your dreaming are metaphors. They're not generally literal. I mean, sometimes they can be literal, but mostly they're not literal. Metaphors are symbols, so you get that a lot. What you get in terms of symbols should be meaningful to you. If the symbols are not meaningful to you, if they don't mean anything to you, then they're not particularly useful. And I would then request whoever's sending them to you to, send me something I can work with. I can't work with these symbols. That would be a thing to say. I just can't work with those symbols. Sometimes people will get symbols that they can't understand because they really don't want to understand what the answer is. They feel they need to ask the question, but they don't really want to know the answer. And in that case, they'll get the answer in some obtuse way that, okay, they got an answer, but they don't know what it means because they really don't want to know what it means. Therefore, the answer comes out in something that's undecipherable. Sometimes that's why you get that. But in your dream world, even if if things that happen in your dreams seem very specific, suddenly you're in this situation, and usually the situation isn't nice. You're in some situation, it's time for the final exam, and you forgot to study. Oh, you got to go up. Oh, you got to go stand up on the podium and give a speech, but you forgot to put your clothes on that day. Same dream. These are all real common dreams. You get dreams that are frustrating. You get dreams that you have to accomplish something, but you just can't ever get there. It's like it's impossible. These dreams are metaphorical. It's not really that your problem is with wearing clothes when you speak. That's just a symbol. It's a metaphor for being insecure, for being inadequate, for not being good enough, not being prepared, not being up to the task. You failed. You messed up. Yeah, you were going to do it, and it was really going to be great, but there you are, naked, and you can't go out at that stage. So it's just a symbol for you being in that position where you mess it up. It's a fear. And the idea is, how do you deal with that fear? Well, now you got choices. That's a symbol or a metaphor for you and your fear. Your fear is you can't do it. You won't do it. You're going to fail at it. So what's your choice? You're going to go up and make that speech anyway and pretend that, like the emperor, you have new clothes? Are you going to, just run away and hide because you're terribly embarrassed? What are you going to do? You're going to magically produce clothes on a hanger? Well, there's some clothes. Put them on and go give your speech and be a huge success. You have lots of options of things that you can do. And sometimes if the dreams are just frustration dreams, we were talking about this at lunch or dinner last night, it's because you're supposed to think out of the box. You're supposed to think of a solution that's outside of the box that defines the problem. It's a course. It's a thing you're supposed to learn to see, you know, what Einstein said. You can't solve a problem at the same level at which the problem was created. You have to get above it. You have to see it from a different perspective. Otherwise, you can't solve the problem. And those kind of frustration dreams are just trying to teach you to don't try to, you know, don't be trapped within the context that the dream gives you. Go beyond it. Go outside of it. You got to look at a bigger picture of what's going on. Take charge of it with your mind. Imagine a solution and make that solution work. That's you finding a solution and making it work. The fact that it's just done with your mind, it's symbolic. You see, they're metaphors. So dreams are like that. And a lot of what we get when we speak telepathically with people are like that, because telepathy mostly isn't words. Mostly it's just understanding. It's knowing that comes in a chunk. Sometimes we get words, you know. I've had conversations that are just words, just like talking to you. I talk, you talk back, and we have a conversation in terms of words. That happens some, but most people, particularly beginners, don't get that. They get metaphor, symbols. So you're often asking yourself, what does it mean? And if you get something that the symbol just doesn't seem to mean anything, then a couple of choices. One, maybe I'm just putting something obscure there because I don't really want to know. I get the message, but I don't like it, I don't want it, so I'll block it out. Now my intellect doesn't have anything but an obtuse symbol to look at. So it can be you kind of protecting yourself from your own thoughts and your own information. It could be that you're communicating with something that's its normal way of communicating, and it's just sending you stuff and doesn't realize that you can't decipher it. In which case you say, you know, hey, I'm not getting this, you need to tell me some other way. That's not helpful. And you might then tell them what way. You know, well, I could use visual, I could use, you know, whole thoughts, you know, tell me a story, whatever. But don't just send me these abstract stuff because I don't know what to do with it. Let's see, what else could you do if it isn't something you know? Well, you could then in another session, another time, meditate and ask, what are these symbols about? Why do I get these symbols? Who's sending me these symbols? And see if you get anything. If you don't get anything at all, if you just get a blank, it's probably because there is no meaning to that symbol. It's just there. Basically, you just got a blank. Either the system's not answering your question, or it did answer it, and you don't like the answer. It'd be one of those kind of things. And I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking about, but these are just some of the things, the ways you could approach it. I take it you get symbols and you don't know what they mean.
I get, sometimes it's clearer. Like one time, just to give an idea, this was during meditation. I was concerned about a pain I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, can you show me what's going on in my heart, and what's going on in my stomach, or if it's my kidneys? And I see this flash and a voice, and it almost looked like it was a doctor, and he said, we are perfect. And then it went away, and then so my assumption that it felt like it released the anxiety, because it felt that it's a symbol that we're all good, that whatever it is, it's all good.
It's okay.
And I received it possibly if they had shown me the actual heart, I may have not really been able to interpret what that meant, you know, because I'm not a doctor. But I got the symbol of a doctor telling me that we were perfect.
Because that's the symbol. The doctor is a symbol of an authority figure on health. So that's why you see a doctor. And then you get the message, And that's from the authority figure. And the message is that everything's perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
And then other times I can't. I mean, it'll be some odd symbol, but I think in the end, some of them I get a feel with, as I'm saying the symbol, I'm getting a feel of the answer. So it's like a language that when you hear immediately, you recognize the word as it meaning something. So sometimes it feels that way. There are other times where, like you said, like this more like in dream format where, and this happened to me last week where I see a dream and I'm being attacked. I mean, there's a tiger running after me and I'm running up a cliff and I'm trying to avoid it, and I hear a voice where I was feeling really good that I was getting away from him, and then I hear a voice, no, a tiger is very efficient at going after its prey. And then I said back, well, I better outsmart him. So that was day one. Day two, I have tsunamis coming after me. I'm in the water. I'm trying to bypass the tsunamis. And I see that there's more waves coming. And I'm like, wow, this is not going to end. This is a survival game. And then I see I'm in these different scenarios. And then the third day I come, and now I don't know, I'm running away from ninjas, and they're all shooting at me arrows, and I'm trying to figure out, well, you know, can I get away? And I all of a sudden have kung fu, and I'm fighting them, but then all of a sudden too many of them come, and I'm in the point where, oh, can I survive this, you know? So I'm trying to, I'm sorry to bore you with my details. I mean, 3 days.
I hate to hear about stage 4.
Yeah. I'm like, what is this? Obviously, they all have. Oh, that night I had asked for clarification on the first two, and I literally thought I heard a voice say, "Well, how many more ways can I explain it to you?"
Yes.
So that's how I got the third one with the the ninjas coming at me. And I'm here thinking, this is about survival. Is it warning me? Is this a bad thing? Is it like, it's a futuristic warning? Or is it telling me, fight the good fight, survive, everything feels like this right now?
I'd say there's two things that it might be. But obviously it's the same dream, just repeated in different forms. And the dream is, you're stuck in a hopeless situation that's about to kill you. That's all the dreams kind of end up in that same place. Whatever it is, whether it's ninjas or tigers or, whatever else, you get stuck in the, so it's the same dream. That's why they said, how many times do I have to, run you through this? Because it's all the same. They just change the format and play it again. And there's two things that are probably the right answer to that. One, it could be one of these things where you are supposed to rise above and out of the box from the situation. So they all come, and what do? Fly. Just fly up in the air, you see? You fly. In other words, you use your mind to look beyond the constraints that you've got to some solution. So the solution would be to fly. All these things were on the ground, and they were all after you, and you could just fly away. You could levitate and go up, whatever, and you're perfectly safe. So that's problem solving at a level beyond the constraints of the problem. The second thing it could be is to get your sense, your reaction to impending death, fear of death, fear of the unknown. And that could be that you get to the point that you say, well, I'll do my best, but this is probably the end. Okay, I'll have to start over, rather than, and freak out and scream and jump up and down and whatever, that you just accept it, it's okay, and you'll have to start over. So it could be a fear of death thing, which sounds like, if it is, you're doing fairly well. You're not freaking out at it, it just is right up to that point, and you're doing what you can. And so if it's a fear of death thing, I'd say you're doing well. Although they all seem to end right before the terrible point. You don't have to actually get ripped into little pieces, which is good. But it could just be rising to a more creative solution. Fighting and with sticks, see, that doesn't work. So as soon as you start to fight back, then it has that kind of makes you in your mind, you could then prevail, you know, you could beat all the ninjas or you could punch out the tiger or something, but that's not the problem they want to give you. So as soon as you fight back, now there's 10 more ninjas. A whole lot more of them come out. So now what are you going to do? See, that wasn't the right answer. Fighting them wasn't the right suggestion because as soon as you try that, it changes the game so that you can't win. And then if you say, oh, I forgot, I've got my machine gun here on my back, rat-a-tat-tat-tat, then suddenly there'd be 1,000 of them, you know, running at you and you'd run out of bullets. And the system is just going to keep putting you back in that same situation unless you do something that takes you out, like stop fighting it at the physical level. Move up to the metaphysical level where you can just fly away, where you can teleport or levitate or whatever out of harm's way, or where you're at peace with your death. So I guess it's one of those two things. And you keep getting them over and over until you get them right. And then when you get them right, you'll get another one or two just to make sure that wasn't good luck.
Yes.
And you really got it right, and then they'll go away.
So then what it's trying to do is teach me how to think outside of the box? Is that it?
Or not to be too terrified of death, to accept death when it's inevitable. So one or the other, probably thinking outside the box, but it's giving you these scenarios, and when you get scenario after scenario, and it's really just the same thing dressed up differently. You know, it's the same plot, same storyline, just different characters, different costumes. Then you know it's a learning, it's a lesson. They're trying to get the right reaction from you. What is your reaction? So your first reaction is fear, and you run away. First reaction. That may not be the best answer. It may be face it as it comes, but maybe not. Fear, run away, but find you can't run away. So then you went to the thing with the tiger, well, I have to outsmart it then. Ah, good thinking. And then it ended. Good choice. You were going to outsmart it. See, that was the good choice. But just keep working with them and you'll see. But it always worked that way with me. You know, it goes through a series of them. When it's a series, you know you're in school. And you keep getting them, and then when you finally figure out what it is and you do it, you'll still get a couple more afterwards just to make sure that you're really doing it. And it wasn't just a lucky guess, that you really have learned that lesson, and then they'll disappear and they won't come back. But then 6 months or a year later, you'll get another one just to see if you still got it, if you haven't lost it. But mostly they'll leave you alone. But series are learning tools. So there's all sorts of series. Frustration dreams are very common. People get into spots where they just can't get to the goal. The goal's impossible. And every time you think you've figured out a way to get there, the system will throw another block in front of you to keep you from doing it. Because that's not the point of you struggling your way there. The point is to solve it some other way. So they're practice. See, what we tend to do in this physical reality is stuff happens, we just react. We never think of looking at the bigger picture, seeing it from a different level. And that's what it's training us to do. Not just being reactive, but to be able to deal with things also at the consciousness level, not just the physical level. So it's just training, if you will, or you're in school. Most of our dreams are like that. We're in school. Just want to see what we do. You know, whether we act in self-centered ways or whether we act in benevolent ways or caring ways. We'll set up some kind of a situation. And how do you deal with death? Does it freak you out, or can you accept that? Do you struggle and fight to the end? That might be all right, but at the end, though, you have to accept that that's the way it is. But anyway, fear tests are common as well. Scary things happen. Monsters chase you, tigers chase you, all sorts of things. And are you afraid? Often with a fear test, which your tiger could have been just a fear test, what you do is you just turn around and face the fear. Tiger runs up and you figure, well, I can't outrun it, and it's uphill, right? It was hard to run. And the tiger's a lot faster runner than you are in any case, and that's just kind of silly. Well, then you look at that and what's left? Face it. So you turn around and look at the tiger, say, hey, big cat, what's happening? You know, you strike up a conversation, you deal with it. And then typically the tiger will go away. It's just smoke. It's just there to see how you're going to react to it. Or maybe with the fighting thing started, you'd have to ask those ninjas, well, what's the problem? What's this fight all about? What's this fight all about anyway? You know, why are you fighting with me? As far as I know, I'm on your side. You know, what's the issue here? You know, have a conversation, and you might just find that they'd go, huh, you know, yeah, we don't really have a fight with you, and they might walk off because you faced it rather than reacted with fear. So there's lots of different things that could be. But fear dreams are very common. And mostly you just face your fear with courage, not with terror, and the scary thing disappears. That's the right answer. Don't be afraid. Face it. Easy to say, harder to do. Because when you're in that being level state, you're not thinking. See, in that being level state, you're not thinking, okay, this is one of those fear dreams, and I should just face it and it'll be all right. That's your intellect. And your intellect isn't working there. You're at the being level. You're just who you are, and if something scary happens, if you turn around and face it, it's because you have real courage. And you know that running isn't going to work. You might as well just turn around and face it. And you do that. You see, then that's the lesson. So you should feel fortunate that the system is giving you lessons. It finds you worthy of spending its time trying to help you grow up. That means it's because it considers that you're on the path of learning. You're growing, you're trying to grow, you're interested in growing, so it's going to work with you. So you get these kinds of lessons. So that's good. It's a good sign. Scary sometimes, but it's a good sign. And if you keep getting them over and over again, it means you're not doing it right. Whatever it is you're supposed to do, you know, whether it's to get outside the box to solve the problem or turn around and face the fear, whatever it is you're trying to do, it's not right. You need to find another way of dealing with it. But if you decide intellectually that the way to deal with it is, say, to face it, then put that in your mind. Next time I get in a scary situation and there's no way out, I'm just going to face it. I'm not going to run from it. I'm not going to be terrified. I'm just going to face it. I'm going to deal with it. And if it ends up killing me, it kills me. Otherwise, it's going to kill me anyway. So I might as well have the courage to just face it and deal with it. That's the better choice. More questions? Yeah, go ahead.
One of the most important concepts in MBT is fear. And I would like to make sure that I understand your definition of fear, because often when I think of fear, I think about the emotion, the physiological reaction. But I get the impression that when you use fear, you're using it in a broader sense to encompass such things as general insecurity or anxiety, or perhaps hatred or defensiveness. So I would appreciate your defining fear for me.
Okay. I just defined love for you, and I can define fear as the opposite of love. But you're right, fear is a more general concept. It's fear of not being liked, a fear of not being adequate. It's insecurity. It's anything that makes you feel negative towards yourself or other people. So it's that sort of thing, is fear. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Anything that makes you feel negative, but that's probably true. Anything that really makes you feel negative. Fear is always about you. Fear is not about other. Fear is about your own issues, your own problems, your insecurity, your problem. So it's not that I have fear that, you're not going to be successful, and that's fear about you. That's really not the case. That's, I'd say, would be a kind of a misuse of the word. Like you say, people would have fear that their children will become drug addicts. Okay, well, that's a fear, but it's their own. I don't want my children to be drug addicts. It's not really a fear for the children. It's a fear that something will happen that they don't want to happen. So it's still self-directed, even though it seems like it's not about them. It's about the children, but it's really about them. It's something they don't want to happen. So fear, though it sometimes looks to be about others, usually it's all about the self. It points directly to you as an individual. But it is a broad thing. And depending on the culture you're in, certain fears can just be cultural. Being insecure can be cultural, depending on the culture, the family, the situation in which you grow up. Matter of fact, in our culture, if you don't have some fear, if you don't have ego, then you're seen as unusual. People would say, well, if I'm nice and I care about and I love people, then I'll be a doormat. Everybody will walk all over me. Everybody will take advantage of me because I'll just be this lovey guy that likes everybody, and people will, take advantage of me. But that's partly because they don't understand. When you are fearless, it doesn't mean that you're foolish. It doesn't mean that you're helpless. It doesn't mean that you're wimpy. It just means that you don't have fear. And the idea that, actually, if you are fearless, you are more powerful. You have more personal power. You're able to change things more, in the world more than if you are fearful. So power really comes from love and from caring, not from being violent. Being violent is power in the short term. Love is power in the long term. I mean, nastiness can roll over people, kill a lot of people, but it doesn't gain any growth for itself. Matter of fact, it de-evolves. It's a self-defeating thing. Fear as an organization or fear as an institution is self-defeating. The negative always crashes and burns under its own weight eventually, even if it takes a while, because it's just dysfunctional. When it's dysfunctional, it's inefficient and doesn't work well and will eventually destroy itself. So that's why the negative side in the mental game, in the consciousness game, the negative side can only get but so powerful. It's limited because it's self-destructive. It pulls itself back down. It can't organize, it can't cooperate. It can't build but so much because it's very singular. There's no trust. It just is limited in its own inability to cooperate, whereas the power of good does not have that limit. It can build, construct, cooperate, build bigger and better things, and fear is limited. So the fear side is a very limited side, but yet the fear side, you can be kind of a big fish in a little pond, If you happen to be the big bully in a place where nobody will challenge you, then for a while, I guess, you maybe can steal everybody's lunch money, or, you know, you can have your way, but it's only temporary. That doesn't last. It self-destructs. Just by being there, you attract something else that's going to stop that bad behavior. So it's a self-destructing process. That's why the power is really with love, and that fear is short-term and generally inconsequential.
But it seems to me that fear is institutionalized in our society in all different ways, at all different levels. You see it in parenting, you see it in management, you see it in the government, and as you said, you've seen advertisers, politicians resort to it. It's like the go-to technique to get other people to do things your way.
Right, it is. But that's because the people are that way. The individuals who want to do that, they're fearful. They, you know, the institutions are fearful. They're fearful that, you know, profits will decline. They're fearful that, you know, they won't, they'll only make $2 million that year instead of 10. They're fearful of all sorts of things, so they keep pushing it more. But that only exists because we, in general, we humans are fearful. So it reflects us. When we're no longer fearful, those institutions will no longer exist like that, because we just won't put up with it. It won't work. It won't get any traction. When we're fearless, their fear won't have any traction on us. As we grow up and become more fearless, fear will be irrelevant. We'll turn around and ask that tiger, you know, whether or not he's having a nice day. So that just won't work anymore. So it's because we are fearful that fear influences us that gives them, you know, their power. So it's our fear is the problem. As we grow up, we'll just look at that fearful stuff, you know, oh, you know, give me all your money and, you know, I won't give you anything back because I'm big and you're small, and people just ignore them. Go, you know, take your electrical company, do whatever you want to do with it. We don't need you. They just won't be interested. They'll reject it. And the power of fear is the power to bully. And if the people that they're trying to bully won't be bullied, just ignore them, well, now they're just reduced to a raving lunatic that's hollering, hey, everybody, do what I say. And if you just ignore them, there's nothing they can do about it. So eventually, it just will go away, all that stuff. As we become less motivated by fear, fear will become less of a motivating tool. So that's the way it works. You don't expect it to work from the top down, the other way around, that the people in the institution say, oh, this fear is a bad thing. Yes, it lets us manipulate the people, but it really isn't ethical and it isn't a good idea. That's not going to happen. It's got to happen the other way around, where the bully is no longer able to bully because nobody pays any attention to him. Then he's out of a job. So,
I guess back to the definitions of things. I know you talked about intent before, and the definition of intent is kind of a little hairy to nail it down. But you've referenced intent being like the coin of the realm, and so to that extent it interests me, probably interests my ego. Is it something that you can develop by practice and basically strengthen your intent?
yes. Yeah, to strengthen your intent, you need a few things. One, of course, you need the intent to begin with, but an intent is weak if your mind is noisy. You know, I have an intent to, you know, do this, but if I got ideas and other thoughts coming through, and I can only hold that intent for a few seconds, and it goes, and then it comes back. If your mind's noisy, like when you meditate and all the thoughts come through that's uncontrolled, then your intent won't have much power. So noise is one problem. You need a low noise intent. If the intent is not sharply focused, if it's not well defined, If it's a real general, kind of unfocused intent, then it'll have a general, unfocused effect, which is usually not a very strong effect. So that's not so good. You have to know exactly what you intend, why you're intending it. You need to be clear, so it takes that clarity, that focus. So those are two things. And the intent to have power has to come from the being level. If it comes from the intellect, we call it a wish. Oh, I wish that would happen. And as we know, wishes are not very effective. So you get into that zone, get into that being level, and then if, say, you're using that intent to heal someone, it's also necessary that you really want to heal them. It's got to be sincere. Can't be just a game that you're playing. It has to be sincere. So you're only going to be good at healing, not because you want to impress people that you can heal, but that you really want to help people. And if you do, then that gives more power to the intent. So intents can be weak or they can be powerful. So those are the kind of the three things that make an intent a more powerful intent. The being level is a very important part of it, that it comes from the being level, not from the intellect. And an example of that that's kind of fun is when Pear Labs was doing its work, they had people who were using their intent to modify the output of a probability distribution. It was basically, they had an event-based, that means like, a radioactive source-based event generator. And the average of the numbers generated, let's say if it was between 0 and 10 would be 5. So you get lines, because it was randomly done, the lines would wiggle a little bit because there'd be little things that would be off. Sometimes you'd get 3 heads in a row, so things would wiggle, but it would stay kind of around that line. And then people would use their intent to make that line, go up or go down. And they found out that when they had males doing it, back to the gender theme, when they had males doing it, the males would almost always be able to move the line in the direction they were asked to move it, like move it up. I want the average to be higher. They'd move it up, and if they wanted it down, they'd move it down. But they didn't move it by much, just enough to be significant, but not much more. When they asked the ladies to do that, it was half the time they wanted to go up, it'd go down. Sometimes they wanted it down, it would go up. It was not very precise in where it went, but it went much further than when the men did it. It was 2 or 3 times greater motion than when the men did it. And they wondered, why was that? Why did women have trouble making it go the right way, but were excellent at making it go farther? And it was because women, not all women, but most women are a little more intuitive, and they tend to work out of their feeling space more than men who tend to work out of their head space, their intellectual space. It's just our culture. It's not a reflection of gender so much as it is a reflection of our culture. And because they were working from the being level, they were a lot stronger. But because they were not really engaged so much at their intellectual level, they weren't very precise. They were just changing it rather than changing it higher, changing it lower. So that was a mystery that they had at Pear, that they couldn't figure out why that was. But that's it. You get a lot more power out of the being level. But you still need that clarity and focus, to get everything you want, which is at the right direction, plus a large effect. Requires the focus and the clarity. The guys had that, but they didn't have the being level. They didn't have the power. So there is you can work on making your intent more effective. One of the things you do, of course, first is meditation. That's always the starting place. That helps clear your mind of the noise. Meditation gives you the low noise mind, and able to hold that low noise for some time. Not just for a few seconds, but hold that steady. That's an important part of it. You need the sincerity, and you need to understand You know, you really need to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you need to be wholeheartedly in it, which brings it to the being level. So some people would say that you need to put some emotion behind it, but that's just because emotion is associated with the being level. You really need to put your being level behind it. Whether you do that in terms of emotion or not is not the point. Emotion can make it more in the being level, since that's where the emotions come from. But it's not really the emotion that makes it more powerful. It's the being level that makes it more powerful. So it comes out of your core. It's not an idea. It's more of a feeling.
Is it fair to say, from what I heard, the intellect kind of sets the direction and the being level kind of provides the momentum behind it?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Yeah, the intellect is the director, and it's good in that role. But it doesn't have the power. It doesn't have the oomph to it. It makes wishes. Not only that, if you're working at the being level, that intellect will just crash it. Just get in the way and crash that being level. That's the person who's asking to have a conversation with someone, and they hear a reply, and suddenly the intellect jumps in, crashes the whole thing. Because once the intellect gets in and starts judging, who said that? What was that? Was that me? Or was that outside of me? Did I just make that up? See, that's the intellect doing its judgment, its analysis, its assessment, and that stops the intuitive thing. The intuitive thing has to be without any of that. The intuitive thing just is, which is what the being level is. The being level just is. It doesn't assess, doesn't judge, doesn't analyze, it just is. It's the way you are at your core.
Okay, when I first started meditating, I hadn't found your work yet, and I was meditating for about a year. Then I found your work, and then after I started listening to your work, I had seen lots of different things in there, like flowers and all kinds of things, but I didn't know that I needed to interact with it or go up to it and see what it'd do. Mm-hmm. And on one of them, it was like a big box, probably 6 foot by 6 foot, and it was a big giant box. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna walk up there and interact with it and see what it does, you know. So I walk up to this thing, and this thing pops out of it like a big Jack in the Box with this big scary thing looking at it. And then these two people were holding the thing. They get out of the box, and they were both laughing, and because they got me, And then I picked up the thing that they had and they walked off, just left. And then I got the thing, and I got inside the box, and I started scaring people like they scared me. And I was just wondering. But then after I scared 2 or 3 of them, and then all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be scaring people in here. And I put it down and walked off.
Yeah. The larger conscious system has a good sense of humor. It'll do things like that. It'll just set something out, particularly if you're thinking, well, I want to see something, I want to interact with something. So what do? You get a big Jack in the Box, right? Not only that, you get in and become Jack. That's not untypical. It has a good sense of humor.
I was wondering if it was like a test of my character. It's like, are you going to scare these people, or are you going to not scare them and be nice in here?
Well, it depends on whether you perceived it in terms of scaring people or having a good time and just having fun.
We were laughing.
Yeah, so it probably was just fine. I don't think that was a problem. But if you're not precise with the system will often lead with a joke. If you're not precise, you have to be precise. You can't say, well, I want to see something. Well, if you just say, I want to see something, you'll get something like that. If you have something more specific in mind, then you'll get that. If it's not, you'll often get something goofy, which is basically telling you need to refine your search a little bit.
I just want to share a little something in the immersive that I went. You were talking about that your intention needed to be a good one, and that it couldn't be a carnival ride. And I remember that the first time I actually felt had this, it was on the last night of the immersive, when I said I would like to see what it is and to be in another dimension. I like to experience that. And I'm not trying to get a carnival ride here. I just want to know what it is all about. And so when I relax into meditation, the first thing I see is this character. He looked like a jester, like a carnival a character. And he's like motioning me. He's going like this, like you may pass. And I thought it was funny because it does have sense of humor.
Does have a
and
sense of
it was a
humor,
beautiful
yeah.
experience for me because it started funny, you know, and everybody I saw there had big smiles on their face, and it was just great. So, but I thought that was
Yeah.
humorous. It was playing on your words.
Hmm.
And I just
Yeah.
wanted to-
It does have a sense of humor, so you can expect jokes sometimes.
I love that. I have a question though, and if I may, about. I hear a lot of people use the word manifesting. Manifesting, you manifest your reality, and you manifest your future, and you manifest what you want. But I guess the way you would say, I think I saw it in one of the pages, consciousness with focused intent can modify future possibilities.
That's it.
I like that much better how it's worded, because it sounds clearer and cleaner and free of woo-woo-ness, you know.
Yeah.
But, so it appeals to me. But, so my question is, and I didn't want to use the word manifesting, how with focused consciousness, can you, are there limitations to what you can modify or manifest? I see, I didn't want to use the word manifest.
Yeah, I know what you
but
mean.
I can't get
Yeah,
by without
there are
it.
limitations. There's actually several limitations. One, the system's not going to help you manifest something that runs over somebody else's free will. No, that's not what it does. The system is not going to help you manifest things that are going to increase your entropy. But you may manifest them yourself anyway. If you know how to focus your intent, you can make that, you can change that probability. You're just not going to get any help with it. You're not going to get any guidance. It's not going to be any easier. You're going to have to do it. And if you're going to increase entropy for not only yourself but other people, it may actually inhibit you. Not necessarily prevent you from doing it, but make it more difficult for you to accomplish that. So it depends. It doesn't like to play heavy-handed in the game. It likes to stay out and let the people do whatever they do. And as much as it can do that, it does. But sometimes it sees that this is something, this little thing happens here, it'll cause this, which will cause that, which will create a lot of entropy down here. And if it can intervene there, it might do that.
So as a parent, how much can I put intentions on my child's future or well-being without, I mean, I understand the free will, so, so how much power would that have of a parent? I mean, do I just give up and say, well, he's going to have to find his own way, or do I continue?
Well, it depends on what it is you want to do. Again, it's not in the process that whether it's good or bad or ethical or unethical. It's in the intent. So if you, let's say this is not your case, but just as an example, let's say your son wants to become an artist, but you know that most artists starve because they end up either doing commercial art or they end up frustrated and end up waiting tables or something else because it's really hard to make a good living by doing art. A few do it real big. Most people don't get paid at all. So you say, you want to have your intention, no, don't do art, become a doctor. Doctors make a lot of money. So you have this intent, no, you don't want to do art, you want to do a doctor. That would not be good. That would be called manipulation. That's not a good thing. But if, on the other hand, you say something like, let's say you're concerned that art's not a really good career, you might say something like, well, you know, look at a bigger picture. See where this will take you. Make sure that you're prepared for what you're going to meet in the real world. The real world is not a very forgiving space. You know, so just make sure, just do your art if that's what your love is, but also realize you're going to have to do your life out there in the world, and it's going to not be easy in art. Maybe art would be a good pastime, a good hobby, or a good night job. You know, you do art in the evening, but it's a little risky as a, you know, as a main profession. But if that's where your heart is, go do it. Go for it. I'll be behind you whatever you do. I'll support you however I can. Now that is not manipulative. That's basically talking about options. Okay, you can still do art, but maybe there's other options besides just doing art. Maybe you could do something else and art, or maybe if you just do art, you need to be prepared for the hard knocks ahead. You know, so that's just information that's useful. So that's not manipulation, that's helpful. So it's not whether you try to use your intent to help out, it's how you do it. If you're manipulative or whether you're just helping. So you don't want to give them answers. You want to give them information so they can make choices. As long as you give them information that helps them make choices, you're okay. If you're giving them the choice that they should make, you know, don't do this, do that, then that's not helpful. That's kind of overstepping your bounds. So if you want to say things like, whatever it is you do, I don't care, I just want you to be healthy and happy and have a good life. You don't have to make a lot of money, or you don't have to do anything that anybody ever notices, but if you're happy and healthy and having a good life, I'm happy. That's all really that matters in this world, is that you learn how to find your happiness. Grow up, become love. That's what's important. Everything else will sort itself out. Well, that's good. You're not really forcing a direction, you're just telling them about how you feel about it. So see, that's good. So there's a lot of things you can do with your intent to manifest, but if you're manifesting results with a child, that's okay when the child's very young, but by the time they're teenagers, that's not much good anymore. You're kind of overriding their free will. They need to be making their own choices, and you need to be giving them guidance, not instructions, and not demands. That'll just make them go the other way. So give them support, give them love, give them information, but let them do with the information whatever they want. And don't worry if they seem to refuse it, because it's just in a kid's nature, in a teenager's nature, to say, nah, that doesn't mean anything to me, or I'm not paying any attention to that, or be looking someplace else, or playing tic-tac-toe with himself, or while you're talking to him. That's their way of saying, this is my choice. I'll make the choice. You know, I'm not going to be pushed into the choice. So if they seem like they're not paying any attention, that's okay. When you tell them, and it's just about information, it's just about caring, they're listening. They'll get the message. They'll take it in, and they'll act on it. But they just don't want to tell you that. They just don't want to show you that they're taking you seriously, because they're trying to become their own independent person, not just doing things because you tell them. But it doesn't mean they throw the information away. It's amazing what sticks in their heads. One thing I found useful with my kids is I would think of, here's what they wanted to do. I thought that probably wasn't a good idea, because I kind of could see where that might lead, and it might lead to a place that wasn't so good. So I'd come up with 4 or 5 alternatives. You could do this, you could do that, you could do what you wanted to do, and you could do this other thing. And I would treat them all equally, without any bias toward any one of them. I didn't have any negative bias toward the one that, you know, I thought was a bad idea. I didn't have any positive bias. It just laid out, here's what will probably happen based on my experience if you take each one of these paths. Just not that I built anyone up, you know, these are the good things and the bad things on this path. These are the good things and bad things on that path. Because every path has good things and bad things. It has challenges and it has advantages and disadvantages. So I'd outline it, go along every one and outline them. And then that was it. I wouldn't say any more about it. Most of the time they'd choose to go down that same path that they were thinking before, because that was their first choice and they were going to do it. But the difference was they had the information now about the downside of that path and about the things that might happen that might be dysfunctional. So when they went down that path, as soon as they saw that dysfunctional stuff starting to form up, oh, bingo, the light went on, I see what's going to happen, I don't want to go there. And they turn around and go back. So they did it, it was their choice, but they had the wisdom to see where it was going and back out of it before it became a problem, because they were aware of the problems. Not because I explained, these are problems that you need to avoid. I just made that one of 5 things and I treated all 5 of them exactly alike. So I gave them a lot of information that they could use, but they had to make the choice. And if they took that wrong path, I let them take it. You know, they're 16, 17, 18, you know, they're old enough to make their own choices and get their own consequences. But I wanted them to have information so that when those consequences started to happen, they'd recognize it right away and wouldn't go down until they were in over their head. So those kinds of things you can do. But you have to be fair about it. You can't say, well, this is the idea I like, so I'll say all the positive things about it, and I'll say all the negative things about the other paths. There's negative and positive things about every path. And let them know that it's just your experience. Well, there's a positive thing down this path you chose, but, you know, becoming a rock singer only works for like 1 in 100,000 people that give it a try. You know, it's positive. You could really do well down that path. There may be fame there, but and fortune, and meet a lot of nice people and whatever. And also there's these downsides. You know, and then you go on to the next thing. So as long as they didn't get the idea that I was trying to manipulate them to one idea or another, I was just giving them information, then they were happy with that and actually glad to get it. They listened. So that's just one approach. As soon as you try to tell a child what to do, they'll push back and they'll do the opposite thing. They won't want to do that if they're teenagers. Teenagers are becoming adults, making their own choices. And to have somebody else tell them what to do is just antithetical to what they're trying to become.
Can we work with the LCS to receive wisdom on how to best approach certain
You can,
situations?
but you will have to make all your choices yourself. Don't expect the LCS to tell you what to do. It won't do that, because then that's it usurping your free will. It will give you information, perhaps, just like I was talking about with the children. It'll give you some information, but it isn't going to tell you how to make a choice.
Or it will make me grow up.
Huh?
Or it will make me grow up as a parent first, as a human being.
Yeah, you can ask for things like, you know, how can I handle this better?
Okay.
And you can even ask, look, my child is having issues and having trouble. If there's anything you can do to help him find a positive path where he can grow up and do well, I'd really appreciate it. Because he's a really good kid, and I think he has a lot of potential to grow up, and he just needs to get started off on the right foot. Yeah, that's a good intent. See, that's not manipulative. It's not getting him to do anything in particular. It's just you doing that. And you can put your own intent into that. Put your own intent to that outcome. That he's going to do whatever he does, but he's going to be able to do that in a positive way. He's going to be able to find his peace. You know, he's going to be able to find his profession. He's going to be able to find his way in the world, and it will be good. He won't be burdened with negativity or with being, you know, oversensitive or undersensitive or whatever else. You can do those sorts of things, and that's fine. So that's an intention for an outcome, but it's a general outcome that lets him choose it. You're just saying, whatever it is okay with me, as long as it's positive for him. So that kind of thing is fine to do. Yeah. Some of the hardest things that parents ever have to do is watch their children make mistakes. But you have to do that, but not without giving them information. You have to give them guidance, but not tell them what to do. Yeah. And if you don't tell them what to do and you don't judge them, you just give them information, you will find they'll actually come to you and ask for your advice, because they'll see you as a source of information that's valuable. Whereas if you do judge them and say, oh, that was a poor choice, you know, they will not talk to you about the next choice they make because they don't want to be judged.
I have one more question. And it's on the lines of manifestation too, or working with the LCS to, we live in a physical reality, so everything feels concrete. How much, even with intent or pure intent, meaning, or sincere intent, meaning that we're not going to infringe on somebody's free will, or, you know, that it will increase our entropy. But can we alter physical matter in any way? You've seen...
Yes, we can. It depends on the probabilities. It's all about probability. What you do is you influence the probability in a particular direction. Very few things have a probability of 1 or 0. If it has a probability of 0, then it just can't be done. It's impossible. If it has a probability of 1, it's going to happen no matter what. It's 1. There is no other choice. Most things are somewhere in between. And if it's in between, you can modify that probability up or down with your intent. Okay? So if you want to do something that is highly unlikely, like you want to sit there and look at this bottle of water and you want it to float up to the ceiling and then turn into wine and then spread down and fall in a lot of little cups, you know. Well, that's very highly unlikely. You know, it defies gravity and a couple of other things, and there's a bunch of us here and the cameras are rolling, so it's really, really unlikely. And you can think about that real hard, and you might decrease, you might increase the probability of that happening from 1 in a billion to 1.5 billion to 1.5 billion. And that's good. You moved it a whole 500 million, but it still isn't going to happen. You know, it's just not likely to happen. So in that way, you can't do that with your intent, or it's not likely you're going to do that with your intent. It's something really hard to do. So some things are easier to do than others. Things that are like this, 40-60. Well, you can change that around to 60-40 the other way. That's not so hard to do, That's not a lot of motion. So those things are a lot easier. So it just depends on what you're trying to do. Things that have a lot of uncertainty around them, that is easier to do. Let's say there's let's say there's a brain chemistry problem. And the brain chemistry problem is that they don't create enough serotonin for themselves, so they tend to be kind of depressed. Brain chemistry problem. Well, that's something that is kind of unknown. And the doctor really didn't stick a camera in there and take a picture of the serotonin that he knows that that's what's going on. They guess at that. It's just a guess. That's what we think's going on. At least he acts sort of like that, and other people act like that. So there's guess. There's a lot of uncertainty what's going on in there. Well, that's something that you can affect more easily, you see, because there's a lot of unknowns. So you can work on that with your intent and modify that, because it could go away over time, it might get worse, there's all kinds of things that could happen, and you can change those probabilities. So it depends on the probability and how much force, how much power you bring to the problem with your intent, your clarity, your focus, and your being level. So that's the thing. We have to have uncertainty, because the more you get to certainty, the more you get close to a 1. And if you get close to a 1, you know, if you're a 0.999999 or something, that's going to be tough to change. But where there's lots of uncertainty, there's room to change things. So it just depends. Things that are nebulous and things that are uncertain are much easier to change than things that aren't. But another thing about changing things is that it takes consistency. You can't just think once about, okay, I'd like it to be this way, and expect a lot to happen. You need to keep putting that effort in. It's cumulative. So if the probability is like this, and you say, well, I want it to be a different way, so it changes like this. Now you put more energy in it, it changes like that. You put more energy in it, it changes like that. If you just keep working on it, you can work it down. The easiest part was the first increment. As the increments gets further apart, it gets harder, because now the probability is starting to get steeper. You know, you're changing more probability. So the next increment's going to be smaller and smaller, but you keep working at it, you can eventually get things that are more likely to happen. But also realize just because it's likely to happen doesn't mean it will happen. Just because the probability is 10 to 1 doesn't mean the one that's the 1/10th probability isn't going to be the one that happens. It just means it's not likely to happen. So you're always uncertain. So that's the general rules, things that are not certain. Now, if you want to have in your situation, you might want to have heart-to-heart talks with your son, telepathically, where you just chat with him. But when you do, it can't be judgmental, it can't be manipulative, it has to be about him. And it can be as simple as, I love you. It can be as complicated as giving him a whole bunch of options and different ways that things could go, and you know, a lot of advice like that. But that's very powerful. And if you do it again, often, every time you do it, you get a little more increment based. You do it, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. Those kinds of things are very powerful. You can connect with somebody, and you know, if they are frightened, give them security. Give them hugs, give them love, tell them they're okay. They've got all it takes to do really, really well. They're very talented, you know, build them up. If it's a problem with self-image, build them up. That's what they need. But just don't tell them what to do. So you can do that telepathically. Think of them and start the conversation. Just work with it. And they will get it. And be repetitious. You can do it 2 or 3 times a day, every day, for weeks or months. That will make a big difference. You can see the difference in their feeling within a week or 2. You can see them feeling stronger and feeling more positive. Just because they get that idea that they're okay, they're doing well, they're competent, that you care for them, that you'll always be there no matter what happens. You know, just all the things that makes them feel more secure is helpful. So those sorts of conversations, they won't necessarily hear it intellectually. They'll hear it as their own intuition talking to them. But they'll listen. But it has to be about them, and it can't be manipulative. It's not like, well, here's what I want the outcome to be, so I'm going to tell them all the things to push them in that direction. that's not good. People know when they're being pushed. It's got to be not about you and what you want. It's got to be what's good for him and what he wants in the sense of more information, more options, feeling more secure and more competent. Those are the kinds of things you can do.
I think in the first conversation I had with you, your advice to me boiled down to make it about other, not about yourself. And I can't argue with that advice. But as I look out in the world and think about what's happened in, let's say, at least recent years in terms of the conversation around the world and patterns of leadership, I have to be honest and say I've been shocked at how many of these conversations seem to boil down to I'm going to make it about me, or I'm going to make it about us, or I'm going to make it about the people who look like me or are part of my group, and the heck with those other people. And I know there have always been people who thought like that, but it seems like it's become much more respectable to articulate those kinds of sentiments and articulate them very strongly to the point where it's considered unpatriotic to disagree with that. And maybe this is just entropy's last gasp, but it seems that some of these sentiments that are being advocated so strongly are not exactly in keeping with the MBT philosophy. So I was curious as to what your response is or perception is of some of these trends that have come up in recent years.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, those things wax and wane. I suspect if we go back a couple of hundred years, you'd find that that small-mindedness, that self-centeredness was even more endemic then than it is now. That almost everybody had that attitude about almost everybody else. And not only was it racial across bigger lines, but it was even village against village, you know, tribe against tribe. It was everywhere. People were very fearful then, and I think it's gotten better. It's gotten better, and now in the last, I don't know, 20 years or so, it's gotten worse. You know, we started to go down the other way a little bit, but that happens. If you ever look at a trend line, none of them are just straight lines. They're always like this, you know, because what happens is it starts to go unstable this way, or it starts to grow, and then that creates problems or issues or something, and it comes back down, and it tends to wiggle around a lot. So yes, we have recently gotten to the point that things that were impolite to say, that were rude to say, that were just plain wrong to say, that were unethical and immoral, are now said with impunity and with pride. Yes, we've gone there, but I think that's temporary. And I think that's due to the excessive amount of fear that's been drummed up in our culture over the last, you know, that polarization goes along with all the beating of the fear drums. Those all go together. The polarization's gotten worse. People's attitudes have gotten worse. Everybody de-evolves a bit when the fear goes up. Fear is in the direction of de-evolution. So as the fear ratchets up, we notice de-evolution seems to increase as well. But that fear is not there because the world's scary. That fear is there because it's being generated. Not so much that there's a big scary world out there. So the fear isn't, you know, the source of that fear isn't real. It's made up. It's generated specifically to let people manipulate other people. So it's not a real fear. So in my mind, it can't last, but for so long. It's one of those things that will run its own course and see its own self-destruction. And it's not a, you know, if it were a real thing, suddenly the world was full of tigers again, you know, big saber-toothed tigers, and they ate people, you know, that'd be a real fear. And you figure, well, okay, that's going to create a lot of fear in the land, and that would be a real fear, but it's not. All the fear is hocus pocus. It's all smoke and mirrors and dreaming up things, you know, all the evil things that the brown people are going to do to us, you know, and on, which is all just nonsense that's being made up. That's real thin, and it's not very stable, and it's not long-lived. It's just part of that, you know, wiggling around the line. So I think that it works both ways. One way it works that those people who are on the kind of the lower end of the evolutionary line, they get into that and they just start evolving and being more fearful. Those that are on the upper half of that line, they look at that and they actually grow up from it because they look at that and they say, that's wrong. This is just really wrong. These ideas, you know, are immoral and unethical, and we shouldn't be judging people by their race or their color or their ethnicity or their religion. All that is bogus. So a whole bunch of people up here are being made aware how bogus that is, while I think a fewer number of people down here are jumping on that bandwagon saying, yeah, get the brown people. So I think if you look at the whole thing, it's probably doing more good than it is harm. It's a very obvious bad example. See, when all that stuff's covered up, when people are walking around with that hate inside, that fear inside, it's personal, it's theirs, but they're keeping their mouth shut because it's not cool to be a racist, say. Well, that means you've got this toxic element in your society, and it's just growing in there, it's just hanging in there, and nobody knows about it because nobody sees it. Okay, now we get to a point where, hey, it's okay to be toxic. Toxic is good. And these people let it all out, and now we as a society said, whoa, we didn't know that was in there. We need to do something about that. Whereas before, nobody knew that anything was wrong and didn't have any idea whether they had to do anything about it. Now people are more aware of the ugliness that's inside that they weren't aware of now. So it does good, too, on the other end. Makes us aware of a problem that's always been there, but just been hidden. Now it's not hidden anymore. Well, you can't solve a problem until you see what the problem is. So in a way, that helps. So there's a positive side to that as well. Lots of people look at this and they were on the fence before and they couldn't be political, they couldn't be bothered with it, but they see this and they just say, that's wrong. And they're getting more involved. You see, that's good. But all you hear is the noise. All you hear is the ones that aren't evolved very much, hooting and hollering about all the stuff that they've been thinking now, but now are able to say. Well, in a way, that's good to know that it's in there. It's like if you have young children and they're always polite and they're always nice and they don't ever say anything out of sorts, you start to wonder what's going on. You know, what is it that I don't know? What am I missing here? Right? Because, you know, that's not the way young children are. You know, they're mischievous. They get into things. They raid the cookie jar. You know, they lie, they steal, they do stuff because they're very self-centered because that's the way children are. But if everything is perfect, going well, you start to wonder what's happening that I don't know about. Well, it's good to know about it because if your children are raiding the cookie jar and doing all these kinds of things, well, now you have moments for correction. You can talk to them about it. You can tell them about things being unethical or things being not right or they need permission. It's not their cookies. You know, you need to ask first and so on. It allows you to make correction. If you don't know about it, it's not good. So in a way, it's a useful thing now that we've gotten this out into the open. We know about it. Next time that it all kind of disappears, hopefully we won't be so stupid as to think it's gone away. We'll make efforts to dig it out and root it out. Maybe we'll do campaigns like we did anti-smoking, you know, where we got $20 billion from the tobacco industry to run anti-smoking. Maybe we'll talk about racism and we'll talk about whatever and make a big campaign because we know it's lurking down there. We could. If we were smart, we'd do things like that because it's important to our culture and our society to have those ideas grow. Well, you know, that non-smoking campaign really worked. That really did. We went from, you know, over 50% smokers down to like 25% smokers over the period of that campaign. And a lot fewer young people are taking up the habit than were before. Before, all the young people wanted to be cool, you know, blow smoke out of their nose, like a dragon. Cool. But it's not so cool anymore. Now it's like stupid. You know, yeah. Blow smoke out of your nose and get lung cancer. Stupid. So those big things work. We could do that. Before we didn't even know it was there. Now we do. So maybe, you know, sometimes we have to be hit in the face 4 or 5 times before we notice, but maybe. So I don't necessarily see it all as a bad thing. All the ruckus that's being raised is also positive in some ways. There's a positive side to it. See what happens when you talk to an optimist?
No, I think you're right that these events have brought the good people, or at least some of the good people, off the bench and into action. And there's a lot of more concerted action to move things in a positive direction than maybe there was a few years ago. I hadn't thought about that, but as you talked, I realized that you know, you made a good point, and that makes me feel more encouraged.
Yeah. Yes, because I think that the number of people who see that as really going backwards and a terrible thing that's been going on is a bigger number of people than the people who are jumping up and down making all the noise. Because the people who see it as a bad thing mostly aren't jumping up and down and making noise. That's quiet. You don't hear from that so much. But I think it's a much bigger reaction there than it is about the noisy people who are finally letting all their hate and stuff out of the basket, you know, coming out of the closet. I think that's a relatively small amount of people. And I don't know that that's growing much. I think it's just a small amount of people, but I think they're kind of energizing a bigger bunch of people that you don't hear from. So that's what I say, that when I say that the negativity sows the seeds of its own destruction, just naturally. It's self-defeating. The things it does are things that cause its own demise. And the more radical and the more dramatic that negativity comes, the more it's going to energize the reaction to that. So it's just something we have to get through. You know, it's unfortunate, but it's just something we're going to have to get through. All right, it's been fun, guys. Thank you for your donations. I thank you for your interest. I thank you for taking the trouble to come here and be part of it. Keep up the good work. Everybody's learning, everybody's growing. I mean, everybody here is enthused about lowering their entropy, and that's good. It's just a beginning. It just goes on and on. You know, if you've been doing this for 4 or 5 years or 10 years, you're just starting. If you've just been doing it for a couple of years, you're just starting. This is a way of life. You know, there's really no end goal to it. It just keeps going. It's a lifetime sort of thing. And the more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. Everybody here is doing well. You're the top of the top, cream of the crop. People who are really trying hard to grow. That's the best, and that's what makes it good for me. When a teacher talks to students who really want to learn, it doesn't get any better than that. You guys always give me energy because everybody here wants to learn and wants to grow. They have problems, they recognize it, and they're trying to work with it. That's all you can do. So thank you.
Thank you for helping.